Everyone, and welcome. I'm Crampton Tolbert, Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council, the citywide nonprofit for New York's historic, architectural, and cultural neighborhoods, working with more than 500 community partners across the city. And we are here today to protest the ever-increasing number of landmark buildings being demolished on the city's watch. Last week, we lost at least our 14th landmark building to the bulldozer with the emergency demolition of 186 Lenox Avenue in Harlem. And it needs to stop. We need to hold the city accountable and demand that they stop demolishing landmarks. From the Dangler Mansion in Bed-Stuy to 14 K Street in Greenwich Village to 351-55 West 14th Street, landmark buildings and buildings under consideration for landmark designation across the 5 boroughs have been ordered demolished by the city or have been allowed to be demolished. Communities across New York have lost iconic and beloved structures and are left with vacant sites that may not be filled for decades. I'll be introducing several of our elected officials and community representatives to talk about what they have been witnessing in their own neighborhoods. HEC is calling for new policies and increased transparency to stop this from continuing, ranging from concrete steps to improve communication with key agencies, increased communication with stakeholders about at-risk buildings, and additional oversight of major construction projects with problematic owners or developers. And we look forward to developing additional ways to help protect our neighborhood from landmark destruction, and especially demanding those in power, like the Department of Buildings and the Landmark Preservation Commission, to work harder and to stop this from happening. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our elected officials and our many community partners who are here today, and I'll be starting with our first speaker, Councilmember Eric Fox.
Thanks, everyone. I really want to thank Village Preservation and the Historic Districts Council, the Archives Project, and everyone who's here, including my colleagues and all the New Yorkers who just come out to express our collective outrage about the totally unnecessary and unjust loss of our historic fabric for no reason other than neglect and indifference, and in some cases outright malice. And our policies have proven woefully inadequate to preventing this from happening, and my colleagues and I are working on additional measures that we can put into place to prevent these unnecessary demolitions. But then you've got policies that are in place that aren't being properly enforced and with improper oversight. And look, we are just the stewards of our historic architecture while we're here in the short amount of time that we are here on this planet, and it's our job to ensure that this historic fabric survives for future generations to enjoy and experience for themselves. And in order to do that, we need to provide proper oversight, we need to have sound policies, and it shouldn't take activists in the neighborhood to bring things to the city's attention. It shouldn't take groups like Village Preservation and HBC to raise the alarm bell for the city about these things. The city needs to provide proper oversight to prevent these tragedies. How many times do we have to learn this lesson over and over again? With 14 Gay in the village, or this mansion in Councilmember Osei's district that is such a horrible story, this beautiful, beautiful Victorian, it looks Victorian, mansion that neighbors were trying to save, and then walking down the street one day, they see it in the process of being torn down for an empty lot. So I really want to thank everyone for coming together around this. We've got to do better. Thank you.
And I'd now like to introduce Councilmember Rios.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I represent Bed-Stuy in Crown Heights, and in Bed-Stuy, 441 Willoughby, which was an historic, beautiful building that wasn't just there for appearance for our community, but actually a place of solace for many of our neighbors. I have one of my constituents and neighbors here, Michael, who went to this beautiful landmark when he was a young kid. And the fact that we, are standing here today, months after it's been demolished, without us wanting it to be demolished, was a complete atrocity. I may sound a little who are a lot more radical than my colleagues, but I truly believe that the Landmarks Preservation Chair, Sarah Carroll, needs to resign. The way that, I'm glad that people share those sentiments with me, the fact that she allowed the demolition to happen within our district was completely uncalled for. She called it a technical error. She was on that commission for years. How was it a technical error to allow this building that meant so much to the neighborhood get demolished in the rate that it was? I also want to speak about Tomar Ehrlich, who was the developer that demolished 441 Willoughby. We cannot let developers approach developing in the way that they did within my community. It was extremely violent. He rushed it, and he included no transparency between himself and his plans, and my office, nonetheless, the community. So I'm standing here today to really preach for more accountability for those that are infringing upon our community. I also want to say that I'm by no means, I'm not a NIMBY. I understand that there's a housing crisis here in New York City and building needs to happen, but how can we as council members work with these developers when they approach our communities in these violent manners and destroy these landmarks that mean so much to the people of our beloved communities. So I'm definitely advocating for more accountability, and then we're definitely exploring options within the council to include more transparency when it comes to protecting our landmarks, or even any type of changes that are happening around our landmarks. Something that we saw in the demolishing of 441 Willoughby is, again, it was a true act of violence. I'm not sure if there was some corruption up top, but DOB and LPC really let it happen and said that it was a technical error. And that should not happen in any of our respective communities. And we're definitely taking a stand up against it. And I'm so happy to stand here with members of my community today. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce Councilmember Christopher Marte.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Village Preservation, HDC, Councilmember Botcher, and Councilmember Chiose. I'm going to go a little bit more radical than my last two council members. What we've seen in my district, specifically down in the Seaport, is collusion. We saw LPC have private meetings with developers, with city planning, and they actually did a dry rehearsal of what they were going to say in the public LPC hearing. And the only reason this came to light is because activists and advocates had to do a FOIA request and actually do a lawsuit to bring this out to the public. This is shameful. And when we look at other parts in my district, whether it's Soho, NoHo, Tribeca, we see developers every single time get their way. And when the community in my council office propose ideas to landmark other sites in my district that should be landmarked, like Chinatown and the Lower East Side, LPC hardly replies, hardly starts moving, because they know that the clock is ticking for when a developer is going to go in there and start building. And we have to redo this process. We have to change the people and the officers that are allowing this misconduct happen in our communities, and we will do that as a council, and we will add that force because we're ready to fight. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much to our electeds. We really appreciate them being here and standing up with us. We look forward to working with them on the concrete steps to stop this from happening. With that, I'd like to invite up our first speaker and co-convener of this press conference, Andrew Vernon from Village Preservation.
Thank you very much, Frampton. So I think we're all here today because we're outraged at what we're seeing happen in our city. Over the last year, we've seen that developers in New York have learned that there's a very easy way to get around the law. All you have to do is neglect your building or tell the city that it's in danger of collapse, and the city agencies that are in charge of preserving those buildings because they're historic landmarks and keeping them standing will either turn a blind eye, they won't be up to the task of preserving it, or they will actually work with you to help you demolish your building and get around the law. That is unacceptable. We have had a landmarks law in New York City for over 55 years, and it has served our city incredibly well. It's the only reason why we have so many of our great beloved landmarks and landmarked neighborhoods that people come from all over the world to see, that New Yorkers love, that they invest their time, their money, their well-being in. This serves all New Yorkers, and what we're seeing is developers are learning that they can get around it, and all too often the city is either not watching or helping them do it. If you look at what happened in Greenwich Village over the last year, we lost 10 early 19th century landmark houses in this manner. That's not a coincidence. That's not, sort of things unfortunately happening in a bad way. That is a bad system. Something is wrong when 10 early 19th century houses in a year are lost in one neighborhood of New York City. There aren't that many early 19th century houses left in New York City. If this keeps going, we're going to lose more and more of our landmarks. So whether it was 14 Gay Street, where the developer said, oh, I didn't know that my contractor did that illegal, dangerous work, or if it's in the meatpacking district, where the developer had plans approved by the city, and then all of a sudden said, oh, we just realized these buildings are in terrible condition and they can't withstand this work, we have to bring them down. That is wrong. The mayor says we need to get stuff built. Well, how about the mayor figures out a way to keep stuff standing that's already built? These buildings are people's homes, there are cultural touchstones, they're parts of what make New York and our neighborhoods special. The law says that they should be preserved, but our city agencies that are charged with ensuring that happens is at best dropping the ball, and at worst colluding with developers to see it happen, and that has to end. Thank you.
Every time they build, after they demolish, it's the ugliest building. It's the ugliest goddamn building you've ever seen.
What the community is asking for. With that, I'd like to introduce James Singletary from Save Harlem Now.
Madam President, I cannot do this without Madam President. Thank you so much. So we are Save Harlem Now, and we represent Harlem. Harlem is our community, and we have both the duty and the responsibility to preserve and to protect Harlem in the same way that the city and the city agencies have that shared responsibility to preserve and to protect Harlem. Harlem, as we know it in New York City, there is no place like Harlem. It is rich in history and in heritage, and in the cultural legacy of Harlem is extremely important. And if we don't take action now, if we don't intervene now to stop this policy of this practice of demolishing unsanctioned, having unsanctioned demolishes, having the wrecking ball to demolish these properties, then we are guilty also. So we have to unite, as we have done here today, with other preservations and organizations, to come together to say enough is enough. If we don't stand together to prevent this practice from happening, how much longer will it continue to happen? It most recently happened at 186 Lenox Avenue, and then Astor Row, 149, and St. Nicholas up in Harlem. So it is a trend, and we must be suspicious of this practice, right? And how long are we going to stand by and allow this trend to continue to happen before it utterly gets out of control and then they completely erase Harlem? We will not stand by. Save Harlem Now and the community residents of Harlem, we will not stand by and allow Harlem to be erased. In the end, at the end of the day, Harlem may not matter to the city, but Harlem matters. Harlem matters to its residents. Yes. Harlem matters, and it matters to everyone. And in the end, demolishing buildings has to stop. And we are here to make sure that it stops.
Yay.
Thank you.
I would just like to say that we, with the Mount Morris Park Community Improvement Association, led the charge last week when 186, which is the latest building that was knocked down in a landmark district, happened. And we are now organizing our colleagues to come up with some solutions. Now, I'd like to just offer one, way to look at it. You know, we have this 7A administrative program where buildings that are occupied with tenants and the landlord neglects the building, the city comes and takes the building over and appoints an administrator to take care of the issues in the building. Why can't a program similar to that with empty buildings be instituted by the city instead of issuing violations to owners who might or might not exist? And once they don't respond and the building is totally deteriorated, they knock it down. Why don't they appoint some kind of administrator to come in, take care of the building, especially because it's landmarked, and do something about saving a landmark?
Thank you so much, Valerie, Bradley from State Podium now. And we also have Madeline Stokely from the Mount Morris Park Community Improvement Association.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm so glad to be here. I have a long history in Harlem that goes back to my mother, Hilda Stokely. Mount Morris Park Historic District was one of the first historic districts recognized in the city. That was back in the 70s. That was because a group of community people came together and said this area is just too beautiful for this to be going by the way of modernization. MMPCI has a history of stopping the tearing down of a row of buildings. Really, the facade was the only thing that was left because the state wanted to come in and take it down and build prisons on Mount Morris Park West. So we have a long history of struggle in Harlem. Langston Hughes said that Lenox Avenue was the soul of Harlem. And people know that Harlem is the soul of black people around the world. Wherever you travel, black people know about Harlem. So for us to lose these buildings is a continuation of the deterioration of our culture. Harlem has changed tremendously over the decades, where in some places you can probably recognize it. We were moved to Harlem. That's not where we wanted to be. Every place that you lived, we were moved out. We ended up in Harlem and we built Harlem. We built a culture despite everything and everyone being against us. And so now that Harlem is somewhat stabilized, we are not going to allow the continue, and as people talked about, this is not by chance. And so here we are, MPCA joining. We're glad to be with these other organizations. One of our members was walking by the building and sent me an email and said, "Do you know the building is coming down?" Well, we thought it was just another scaffolding because there's so many around the city, and they were putting scaffolding so things wouldn't fall down on people. So we're not only speaking about the physical structure, we're speaking about the soul of Harlem and therefore the soul of black people. And so we will continue to work with you to struggle against this as well as other violations of us and our humanity. Thank you so much.
So I just want to say, as being a Harlemite, as a little girl, those buildings in Harlem on Lenox Avenue matter. They matter because it tells me where I am and who I am every day. You take away the structure, you chop away at my psyche, at my schema, at my soul. Why did MTA know about the building coming down and I didn't? Waiting for the bus in 7 with a bunch of people that morning. Again, we thought it was scaffolding. It's by design. It's by design. We don't know. We wouldn't know. But MTA knew, and I didn't. No explanation, no process. So if we just knock down this building because we said it has violations, I'm sure it does, how would you feel? Again, you might not care, but we're asking you to be fair. Because again, when it comes down, what goes up, we must have a say. And how that space, like you said, is going to be ugly. Is it going to be for something of good for the value of the community? Affordable housing is what we really need. So you're going to ask us now or later. Okay, so you didn't do it now, but later we're coming for you. We're coming for you. You're going to have answers. We want to see architecture. We want to see structures. We have questions and we want answers. And we're not going to stop until you understand that landmarks in Harlem, historical Harlem, will not be torn down, will not die. You will not bury the people and bury the land and bury our history. Thank you.
I'd like now to turn to our advocates from Bedside, Michael Williams, and his fellow advocates from Justice for 441 Willoughby.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Williams, Justice for 441 Willoughby Avenue. I've been living there all my life. 60 years, up and down Willoughby Avenue. This building meant a lot to me. Not only to me, but the people in the community. And to see this building no longer there on the corner of Nostrand and Willoughby is horrible. My brother and I joined the Cub Scouts in the 60s. And we had a great time with the Cub Scouts in this building. My parents, the community, repast, birthday parties, weddings. We had a lovely time at this building. But now, today, as I stand here, it's an open lot. And it's an open lot that I cry every day I walk by it. And not seeing this wonderful building that's no longer there. So the people in the community, they walk up to me and say, Michael, what's going on with the building? What happened? I said, well, someone came along and just knocked it down. And it's awful to have something like this, beautiful like this, that's no longer there. People from the Marcy Projects, Jay-Z, parents used to come to this building and have parties. That's no longer here. So all I'm asking is for justice for 441 Willoughby Avenue. Thank you so much.
And our final speaker will be Rachel Levy, a friend of the Upper East Side.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here. I'm Rachel Levy, Director of Friends of the Upper East Side Historic District. We're here today to support and share in the collective outrage over the catastrophic failure of the Landmarks Commission and the Buildings Department to protect our historic buildings across New York City. This is happening, as you can see, in neighborhoods from Bed-Stuy to the Village to the Upper East Side to Harlem, truly everywhere, and it's unacceptable and it has to stop. We're here because we lost a building at 21 East 65th Street last December. At the end of a Friday, we got a call that there was an emergency demolition happening. This was a building that was part of an approved project by the Landmarks Commission as well as the DOB to construct yet another luxury tower on the corner of Madison Avenue, and this facade was meant to be incorporated into that structure. Lo and behold, there was a construction error, but this is not acceptable. We can no longer stand for improper oversight, lack of resources. All of these things need to be fixed, and we can't stand for the loss of any more historic buildings across our city.
Well, thank you so much to everybody. We're happy to answer questions. We're committed to working with our elected officials to be sure that this trend does not continue. And as you can see, and again, just to be clear, we're talking about all buildings that are landmarked or were slated to be landmarked, which means the law says they should not be demolished, and yet they were. And so clearly the people in charge of enforcing the law in New York City are not doing their job, and that has to come to an end. So I don't know if there's any questions from the press.
Yeah,
Yes.
a couple questions. Everybody, lots of speakers mentioned the trend. Is this trend unusual before? Has this happened? I mean, how is this in comparison to previous years?
This is definitely more than we have seen in a year, at least recent years, and the Landmarks Commission has admitted that, and they have said they are very upset about this. They're so upset this is happening. They hope it doesn't happen again, and that's really the extent of what they've said. They hope it doesn't happen again. They have not given concrete ways to stop this and make sure this does not happen again.
And that was my follow-up question. What's your response? I'm sure many of you have reached out to the Landmarks Commission. What is their response? Do you have any documentation from them?
You know, in each case it's a different excuse, but you know, the time for excuses is gone. This is not a coincidence when you see 14 buildings in a year that the law says are supposed to remain standing, demolished under these circumstances that are about sloppy work or mistakes or bad communication between agencies. There is no excuse. The system is broken. The system has to be reformed. These buildings in Harlem that people talk about should not have been demolished. The one in Bedford-Stuyvesant that was under consideration for landmark designation should not have been demolished. The 10 buildings in Greenwich Village should not have been demolished. These are things that the city should have prevented from happening, or shouldn't have had the trigger finger to say, well, they're in too bad a condition, they have to come down. So there's a bunch of different factors involved here. They all point to the city not doing its job.
I'll also add that this administration, has consistently said build, 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 build more, build more, build more. And that could be okay. Like, we can build, we need to build more affordable housing. Again, there is a housing crisis, but it seems as if developers have been picking off these landmark sites and have found an easy route to be able to do that. And through my experience in terms of trying to protect 441 Willoughby, it seemed like DOB and LPC did not care about the pushback from the council member nor the community. So I'm not sure if there was a increase through the shift in administration, but it's something that I've noticed too.
And I must say that I don't think that this is a mistake by anybody. The real estate property developers have owned New York City forever, and this is not, oops, we made a mistake here, oops, we made a mistake there. No mistake.
And it's benign neglect also, especially in Harlem. It's benign neglect. If you keep sending violations to owners, for years, 10 years, 12 years, or whatever, what's going to happen to the building? It's going to deteriorate. So at some point you have to say, this is not happening. The owner is not going to address the problem. So we've got to step in. And this is what we're asking the city to look at. Come up with a process for how to treat landmark buildings that have been neglected by the city agents.
And just to follow up on that, 186 Lenox Avenue, this was not an issue overnight. This building had had violations for decades. The city knew about this, and yet they let it be demolished. But the elected officials, the community board did not know until it was too late. Why do we not have a database? We are interested at HCC in working on a survey with our fellow organizations, but we should in the community have to go out and say, what about all these buildings? The city should be doing this work to proactively identify which buildings are at risk and how to save them before it happens.
And then my final question, it sounds like you're saying the city violated a local law. Then isn't it appropriate for you guys to file a lawsuit? Is that something you want to consider?
Well, look, legal options are always a possibility. Unfortunately, in the case of virtually all of these buildings, they're now gone. So what we need to do is prevent us getting to this point where these buildings that the law says are supposed to be saved are actually saved and they're kept standing. And just to sort of echo what other folks said here, the case of 14 Day Street in Greenwich Village, literally for years there had been violations on this building. A new owner had a miserable track record of how he handled his buildings and his tenants. The city had actually taken it to court in other cases. How many more indications did the city need that this was a place that they needed to step in and take some action, not just sit around and send letters saying, oh, you need to fix this until the building fell down?
And I'm sorry, Bed-Stuy is a working class community. Harlem is a working class community. Yes, the building is gone and demolished, but no one has the time nor the money to spend on a legal fight with a multi-million-dollar developer company or developer that demolished the building in the first place. So yes, I think a lawsuit could definitely happen, but I think these developers take advantage of the fact that when they are building in communities of color, they can take advantage of the fact that if a lawsuit may be started, it might fizzle out over a couple of years.
So then could you not then do something against the Landmark Commission, something there, maybe the chair?
We're asking Sarah Carroll to resign.
Short of resignation, is there a way to
I think we're all committed to working with our elected officials to see real reform happen at the Landmarks Preservation Commission of the Department of Buildings, because they are at best dropping the ball and at worst colluding with the developers to see our history destroyed.
I mean, we know that the Landmarks Commission has deferred a lot of these decisions to the Department of Buildings due to public safety. When there's an immediate public safety need, they say it's out of our hands, and we really respect public safety. We know that's important. But the Department of Buildings, the commissioner just resigned. They have an interim commissioner. They have a lot of vacant staff positions. Their job is public safety. It is not protection of our landmarks. And for landmarks to say it's now out of our hands, then these buildings are going to continue to come down.
Are there no legal penalties like fines that would automatically apply?
A lot of these developers and property owners have racked up major fines, major violations over decades. But once those buildings come down again, even if they want to build, they can build a new building, and they can still pay those fines. And a lot of developers either are intentionally doing this or willfully allowing their buildings to decay, or they cannot. They cannot afford to keep up their buildings, and we want to help those property owners. We would like to help find solutions to this, but the Landmarks Commission does not reach out to us. The Department of Buildings does not reach out to us. In the case of 186 Lenox Avenue, the Department of Buildings said the emergency declaration is between the property owner and the city. It's not between anybody else. So that's why we didn't know. So how can we help them if they're not telling us what's going on?